When we first moved into the neighborhood, I thought we'd finally found some peace. It was the kind of place with clean sidewalks, trimmed hedges, and families who waved while unloading groceries. I remember watching my daughter roll down the driveway in her chair, head tilted up to catch the sun like she was tasting something sweet. That's what I wanted for Hera, calm, safe place where the noise of the world couldn't reach too far in. After years in the military, after all the places I'd been and things I'd seen through the scope of a rifle, I didn't think peace was something I could ever hold on to again. But then she was born, and everything shifted. I traded missions for mornings with coffee on the porch, exchanged fire commands for the sound of her humming. This cul-de-sac felt like the perfect stage for our quiet life. I taught her to identify the birds nesting in the oaks, and in the evenings we'd sit side by side, the dusk settling in around us like a blanket. She'd point out stars before I could see them. Most of the neighbors kept to themselves. A few smiled and made small talk, but I could tell they didn't know what to make of us. Some were curious about my background, some avoided asking. The ones who noticed my daughter's condition usually wore that polite, mask-kind eyes, measured tones. They meant well, I think, or maybe they just didn't want to get involved. That's the thing about neighborhoods like this. Everyone wants the illusion of community, but few are willing to stand in the rain with you when the weather turns. Still, we were content. I kept our home immaculate, not for the HOA, but because I take pride in discipline. I kept my hands busy fixing what didn't need fixing. My daughter filled the spaces between the silences. We had each other, and we had the quiet. I thought that was enough. It didn't take long, though, for the cracks to show. Small at first, like a hairline fracture in a glass that still holds water, but I've been trained to see what others miss. And I felt it, long before it broke something wrong sitting just beneath the surface, waiting to rise. My daughter's name is Olivia. She was born on a Wednesday morning just before dawn, and from the moment I held her, I knew I'd never approach life the same way again. Her body was small and soft, but her presence filled the room like a drumbeat. The doctors told us early that she had cerebral palsy, the kind that affects muscle control and balance. They gave us pamphlets and long explanations I can barely remember now, except for the way they looked at me like I might crumble. But I didn't crumble. I did what I'd always done. I adapted. I learned. I trained. I became the kind of father who could lift her from the bed to her chair in one smooth motion, who could turn feeding tubes and therapy schedules into second nature. She didn't cry much as a baby. She just watched. Those big dark eyes never stopped moving, and even before she could speak, she knew how to make herself understood. Sometimes I swear she speaks more clearly without words than most people do with them. She's 12 now. Her legs don't work the way she wants them to, and her hands sometimes tremble when she paints, but she insists on doing things herself. She's stubborn like that. I've seen her spend an hour gripping a pencil just to write one word. And when she does, she beams like she just landed on the moon. She tells stories with her paintings, soft watercolor landscapes and skies full of stars, and I hang every one of them around the house like precious trophies. There's something about Olivia that calms a room. She listens, really listens, and she remembers everything. The neighbors who take time to know her usually walk away changed, a little softer, a little more aware, but others just glance at her chair and look away, as if acknowledging her would be some sort of obligation. I don't press it. I've never cared much about whether the world accepted us. I only care that she feels safe, that she feels loved. We used to take long walks around the neighborhood, her in her chair and me beside her, pushing when she got tired. She'd stop to watch butterflies or wave at dogs behind fences. She liked the world in motion, all the things people rush past. I remember once she pointed out a tiny bird's nest tucked into the crook of a mailbox post. I had passed that mailbox every day and never noticed. She just smiled and said it had been there all along. Living with Olivia has made me slower, more patient, more precise. She sees beauty where others see inconvenience. She never complains even when things are hard. She trusts me completely, and that trust weighs more than any uniform I ever wore. She's the reason I left the battlefield behind. And later, when one came right to our doorstep, she was the reason I didn't let it consume me. Her real name is Meredith, but we started calling her Karen long before things got serious. It began as a joke between me and Olivia after one of those strained encounters you file under strange but not quite worth making a scene over. She had that clipped voice, the kind that sounds like it's used to being obeyed. She spoke in statements, not questions, and every sentence had the flavor of a complaint hiding under layers of politeness. She lived 2 doors down in a white colonial, with black shutters and perfectly symmetrical bushes. You could always tell when she was home by the sound of her dogs barking or her voice scolding someone on the phone. I never saw her husband, and I only saw her daughter once, a teenager who moved away shortly after we arrived. Meredith didn't welcome us to the neighborhood. She left an HOA pamphlet in our mailbox with a yellow sticky note attached. It said, "Please review. Important for first impressions." At first I thought she was just one of those people who needs rules to feel comfortable. I didn't mind. I like order myself. But it became clear she wasn't interested in rules so much as control. She walked the street in the mornings like a sheriff making her rounds, glancing at garbage bins and porch furniture, making mental tallies. If someone left their Christmas lights up too long or trimmed their hedges unevenly, she would bring it up at the HOA meetings like it was a threat to national security. With Olivia, there was always something behind her smile. She'd crouch down to speak to her in that syrupy voice people use when they think children can't understand full sentences. Olivia would give me a look, the kind that said more than words ever could, and I'd step in quickly to break the tension. I didn't like how Meredith looked at her, like Olivia was a puzzle that didn't fit into the box she expected. The first real issue came when I installed a small ramp at our front door. It wasn't obtrusive, matched the porch color, met code, but Meredith called it an eyesore during a meeting. Said it clashed with the neighborhood's colonial aesthetic. That's when I started paying closer attention. She didn't yell or curse. She didn't threaten. She smiled with her teeth and handed out paper citations from the HOA like parking tickets. But I've met people like her in far more dangerous places. People who think their version of order matters more than human decency. People who believe they're always in the right. People who get angry when the world doesn't shrink to fit their comfort. And just like those people, Meredith was waiting for a reason to act. It started with the ramp, but that was only the beginning. After that, it was the van. Ours is a little older, tan with some sun fade, but reliable. It's outfitted for Olivia's chair, with a lift on the side and a lowered floor. I park it in our driveway, where there's room and easy access. One morning, I came out to find a note under the windshield wiper. No signature, just a typed message that read, "Commercial-looking vehicles degrade the neighborhood's visual character. Consider parking it in your garage." Our garage is half storage and half workspace, and even if I gutted it, the van wouldn't fit with the lift hardware. I shrugged it off at first, but I saw Meredith watching from behind her living room blinds, the corner of the curtain slightly parted. The next HOA meeting included a new proposed rule about vehicle types and garage requirements. It didn't pass, but that didn't stop her from pushing. Soon after, she filed a formal complaint about the potted plants on our porch. Olivia had picked them out herself, purple salvia and marigolds in simple ceramic pots. The letter I got said we were violating the neighborhood's visual harmony by having non-conforming vegetation. That one made me laugh, but Olivia didn't find it funny. She was quiet the rest of the day and didn't ask to water her plants that evening like she usually did. That was the first time I got angry. Still, I kept calm. I documented everything. Every note, every complaint, every strange look or offhand comment. I didn't escalate, didn't argue. I knew the value of patience. Meredith, I could tell, mistook that for weakness. She grew bolder. One afternoon, she approached while Olivia and I were sitting on the porch reading. She smiled that tight-lipped smile and said, loud enough for Olivia to hear, that perhaps we should consider a more accommodating community. I asked her what she meant. She waved a hand toward the street and said, just that there are neighborhoods with, better infrastructure for families with special needs. I didn't respond. Not with words, anyway. I looked her in the eye long enough for her to finally blink and walk away. That week, 2 more letters arrived. One about our trash bins being visible from the street for longer than the permitted window. Another about excessive sidewalk occupancy, a thinly veiled jab at Olivia's routine strolls. I tried to keep things normal for my daughter, tried to shield her from the pettiness, but children know when something's wrong. She stopped waving at the neighbors. She asked if she was allowed to go outside. That cut deeper than anything. And the whole time, Meredith kept smiling. Always within view, always poised like she was waiting for us to make a mistake big enough for her to justify what she already believed. I stopped wondering if this was about rules and started thinking it was about her wanting us gone. The first time she said something that truly felt like a threat, it was early evening, and Olivia and I were setting up her easel near the sidewalk. The sky was a soft pink, and she wanted to paint the row of trees down the block while the light was still low. I was adjusting her chair, and she was squeezing paint onto her palette when Meredith walked by with her dogs. She didn't smile that time. She stopped a few feet away and looked at the easel, then at Olivia. "You know, accidents can happen when people clutter the sidewalk," she said. Her tone was casual, but there was something cold underneath it. I turned slowly, met her eyes, and asked her if she was suggesting something might happen to my daughter. She smiled again, not like before, and said, "Of course not. I'm just saying people need to be mindful, especially when children are involved." After she walked away, Olivia looked up at me and asked if she was in trouble for painting. I told her no. I told her she had every right to be there. But inside, something started to burn low and steady. It wasn't fear, it was focus. I'd heard that tone before, overseas. The way someone shapes a warning so it lands just short of illegal. It's the sound of a person who wants to push until someone snaps. Things didn't cool off. 2 days later, we found chalk lines on our driveway. Crude outlines of a figure in a wheelchair. Olivia didn't know what it meant. Not really, but she could tell it wasn't meant to be funny. I scrubbed it away before she could ask more questions. That night, I installed more cameras around the house. I moved her bedroom further from the front windows. I started keeping my old field journal again, writing down license plates, odd behavior, things that didn't sit right. The old instincts came back quickly. Then she started open carrying. At first I thought it was a one-off, a political statement or some kind of posturing. But she began wearing the pistol every time she left the house, clipped to her waistband in a gleaming holster. She'd walk her dogs right past us, hand brushing against the grip, eyes on Olivia's wheelchair like it was something offensive. She made sure we saw it, made sure we knew she wasn't bluffing anymore. I filed a report with the HOA. No response. I went to the sheriff's department, explained the pattern, the veiled threats, the presence of a weapon in escalating encounters. They took the report but said open carry was legal in the county. Unless she pointed it, there wasn't much they could do. They didn't understand what she was doing. But I did. She wasn't just carrying a gun. She was carrying the idea of what she could do with it. And she wanted us to feel that. It was a Saturday, warm enough for short sleeves and the kind of breeze that carried the smell of fresh grass and barbecue charcoal. Olivia had been cooped up most of the week after a round of rough physical therapy sessions, and she was finally feeling good enough to spend some time outside. She wanted to finish a painting she had started earlier in the month, a landscape of the neighborhood trees during spring bloom. I carried her easel out to the lawn and helped her set up beneath the dogwood by the curb. She had her brushes arranged in her lap, palette balanced on the tray of her chair, already humming as she started mixing color. I stayed nearby, raking a few leaves that had blown into the flower beds, close enough to hear her if she needed me, but far enough to give her space. She always liked the feeling of independence when she painted. That's how we were when it happened. I had my back to the street, bent over a pile of leaves, when I heard the dogs bark. I straightened up and turned slowly, already knowing who it was. Meredith was walking toward our property, her dogs tugging on their leashes. She had that same smug tilt to her chin, sunglasses perched high, and her hand already resting on her hip. I could see the shape of the pistol on her belt, the polished grip reflecting the sunlight. Olivia paused her painting, looking from me to Meredith, sensing something wrong. I stepped forward, placing myself between them as casually as I could. Meredith didn't slow down. She crossed onto the edge of our lawn and stopped just a few feet from Olivia's easel. "You were told this wasn't a park," she said, voice sharp and steady. "This kind of obstruction belongs on private property, not public walkways." I told her the sidewalk wasn't blocked. Olivia was on the lawn. There was plenty of room to pass. Meredith didn't respond. She just looked past me, eyes locked on my daughter. Then she reached down and unbuckled the strap over her holster. I saw her fingers move. The sun glinted again, and suddenly I was no longer on a suburban lawn. I was back in a crumbling city with heat waves rising off concrete and adrenaline roaring through my ears. My vision narrowed, not from panic but from training. The noise dropped away, and I saw everything with crystal clarity. The angle of her arm, the twitch in her jaw, the weight shift in her back leg. She wasn't trying to intimidate us anymore. She drew the weapon and raised it. My body moved before the thought could finish forming. I pivoted in front of Olivia and dropped low, pushing her chair backward with one hand while reaching into my waistband with the other. I hadn't carried a gun in years, not outside a range, but I still had my concealed carry permit, and the habit never left me. The pistol was cool and solid in my grip, and I didn't raise it. I just held it low and locked eyes with her. She fired once. The shot cracked the air like splitting wood. The bullet hit the tree behind us. Bark exploded in a short burst, raining splinters on the grass. Olivia screamed. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I kept my eyes on Meredith and raised my voice slowly, clearly, like I was speaking to a man with a bomb strapped to his chest. Put the gun down. She hesitated, just for a moment. Then the sound of tires screeching pulled both our attention to the street. A neighbor's car had stopped in the middle of the road. Someone was yelling. Another person came running from a few houses down. I kept my stance, still shielding Olivia, gun low but ready. Meredith's hands shook. She looked around and realized she had gone too far. I didn't lower my weapon until she dropped hers first. The police arrived within minutes. I stayed where I was, arms raised, gun on the grass beside me. I told them what happened. The witnesses confirmed it. Olivia was crying in my arms. My hands never left her shoulders after that. Not once. When I joined the military, they put a rifle in my hands and taught me how to breathe differently. Not faster or slower, just more aware. Every inhale had weight. Every exhale was measured. They taught me how to see a room before I entered it, how to scan rooftops in crowded cities, how to anticipate movement before it happened. That training never leaves you. It becomes part of your wiring, something deeper than instinct. It doesn't just switch off when you hang up the uniform. That morning, when Meredith pulled the gun, I didn't think about what I should do. My mind didn't race. There wasn't panic or shouting inside my head. It was quiet, clear, a slow motion kind of calm. My first thought was Olivia, where she was, how far she could move on her own, what direction I could shield her from. My second thought was Meredith's stance. Feet too close together, elbow locked. She wasn't trained. She didn't know what a loaded weapon does when nerves take over. That made her more dangerous. I didn't lift my weapon, not because I couldn't, but because I chose not to. She was unstable, but she wasn't aiming anymore. Once that bullet missed, her confidence cracked. I could see it in her hands. She wanted to scare us, maybe prove something to herself. But when I stood still with a firearm in hand and didn't run or raise my voice, she started to unravel. That control, that quiet, is the only reason Olivia is still alive. If I had rushed her, she might have fired again. If I had raised my gun, she might have panicked. I knew better. A sniper doesn't respond to noise. A sniper responds to patterns, to posture, to shifts in breath. I watched Meredith the way I'd watched men on rooftops holding triggers to detonation cords. You look not at what's in their hand, but how their shoulder twitches. You read the person, not just the weapon. Part of me wanted to end it there. One step forward, one clean motion. I knew I could do it, but Olivia was behind me, and I could feel her breath hitching. I could feel her hand gripping the armrest of her chair, waiting to see what I would become. I thought of what it would mean for her to see her father kill someone. I thought of the fear already carved into her by that single shot. I couldn't add to it. So I stayed still. I used every part of my training not to fire, not to flinch, not to give Meredith what she wanted. Because the hardest part of being trained to kill is knowing when not to. That was the skill that saved us. That was the difference between what happened and what could have happened. The flashing lights came fast, washing over the trees and rooftops like a warning siren for the entire street. Neighbors began to gather, some with phones out, others just standing in stunned silence. A deputy shouted for everyone to stay back, and I slowly stepped away from Olivia with both hands raised. My pistol lay on the grass where I had placed it, after making sure Meredith was disarmed. I didn't want any misunderstandings. The officers were tense. You could see it in how they moved, hands hovering near holsters, eyes darting between me and Meredith. I kept my voice calm and even, told them exactly what happened, where the weapons were, who had fired. A younger officer approached me while another guided Olivia toward a neighbor's porch, where someone wrapped a blanket around her. She hadn't spoken since the shot. Her eyes just followed me the whole time, wide and afraid. Meredith started crying once she was in handcuffs. She kept saying she felt threatened, that she was standing her ground, that we provoked her, but it didn't hold. There were witnesses, people who had seen the whole thing, heard her yelling, saw her raise the gun. The tree behind us had a fresh gouge in the bark where the bullet landed. One of the officers took photos. Another bagged her pistol. I gave them the footage from my security cameras. The motion detector had caught everything. They asked if I wanted to press charges, and I said yes without hesitation. She fired at my daughter. That wasn't going to be forgiven or forgotten. Even then, part of me stayed alert, not out of fear, but habit. I watched their hands, listened to their tone, tracked their questions. It's a strange feeling, being calm in the middle of chaos, knowing exactly what to do when everyone else is trying to make sense of the mess. That control isn't natural. It's built through fire and held through discipline. By the time they put Meredith in the back of the cruiser, Olivia had finally started to cry. I walked to her slowly, crouched down, and she grabbed my arm so tightly I could feel the tremble through my skin. I told her we were safe now, that it was over, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Not really. Things like that leave a mark. Even when the noise fades, something always lingers. The charges came quickly. Reckless endangerment, unlawful discharge of a firearm, assault with a deadly weapon. There was talk of attempted murder, but her lawyers argued it down. They tried to paint her as mentally unstable, said she was stressed and overburdened with HOA duties, tried to shift blame by saying I had intimidated her with my military background. It didn't work. Too many people had seen what happened. Too much had already been written down, recorded, backed up with evidence. The police confiscated her gun that day, and she never got it back. The court issued a protective order that barred her from possessing any firearms. Her concealed carry permit was revoked. She was fined, put on probation, forced to attend mandatory counseling. She wasn't allowed within 200 feet of Olivia or our home. The HOA tried to pretend she had never represented them. There were no apologies, just distance. They replaced her on the board and sent a vague email about community values and neighborly conduct. It was as hollow as it sounded. Some neighbors reached out after the hearing. One couple brought over dinner. Another left flowers on our porch with a note that just said, "We're sorry. We should have said something sooner." I didn't blame them. Not exactly. Fear makes people quiet. But I didn't forget, either. Meredith stayed in the neighborhood for a few more weeks. We didn't see her often, and when we did, she kept her head down. She moved out not long after that. Sold her house to a young family with 2 kids and a golden retriever. Olivia waved to them from the porch the day they moved in. It was the first time I'd seen her do that since before the shooting. There was no trial. She pled out. It was cleaner that way, less public, but justice doesn't always come with a verdict. Sometimes it comes with the sound of a moving truck, the stillness of an emptied house, the knowledge that she couldn't hurt us anymore. And that was enough for me.